Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with a bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. I'm playing as the Skaven against the High Elves on the map Shaggoth Strand. Obviously the game just came out, I don't know what the meta is, I don't know how anything's rolling, so I kind of just made a quick comp on the fly and really wanted to try a quick match and give it a shot. So I don't have no idea which faction is currently the strongest or the best or anything like that. I don't know what the meta is, I don't know anything like that. So I just wanted to give it a try and try out the Skaven. And yeah, this intro might be a little longer than usual because I'll be going over a bit more of the stuff. Usually I try to run through which units I brought and why, because not everyone knows what everything is in Warhammer 2. Some of you guys might be watching and thinking whether or not you want to get it or want to see like how each faction works. I'll kind of touch on some of the mechanics and some of the unique things about each of these of the Skaven units. Just kind of discuss, as well as I guess the High Elves, and so this intro might take a little longer than you guys are used to with the quick match videos. Regardless, for my lord, I was going into this one, and I was a little rushed. I guess my opponent either knew exactly what he was doing, or had an idea, or he might have had a pre-made comp. I'm not sure. So I didn't get much time to set this comp up. I kind of rushed it, and just kind of brought what I thought could be useful against High Elves. Based on what I've seen in the videos, I know High Elves can bring a decent amount of shooting, decent amount of monsters, decent amount of, honestly, they're kind of well-rounded in all aspects, so you kind of want an army that can kind of deal with that somehow. So their lords can be pretty annoying, and from what I've seen, and they've got a lot of different types of lords and heroes, so I was definitely a little worried about that, and worrying with dealing with single targets. And of course, artillery is not that great, so I decided to bring a pretty heavy hero squad here. For my lord, I did bring Queek Head-taker. Now, before we go into more stuff, I guess I should go over the unique Skaven mechanics. Skaven have an ability on a strength in numbers, which affects each larger unit, or each infantry unit, as far as I'm able to tell. And this is a leadership buff, as well as a melee defense buff in exchange for a speed debuff, while the Skaven are above 50% model count. I'm not entirely sure if it's a model count or HP. Some of these spells that say that on paper it's a hit point thing, I'm pretty sure it works model-wise. But regardless, if hit points are less than 50%, these guys will lose this ability. Their other ability for Skaven is Scurry Away, which kicks in when their leadership is low. I'm not entirely sure what leadership is high implies, if that's just 50% or higher, like it is in the case of Frenzy. But, yeah. Scurry Away results in a pretty significant speed buff of 12%. Should be about 6 points, given that Smoke and Mirrors from the Lore of Shadows gives you about 3 points of movement speed. It should be about 6 with it 6%. It should be about 6 points here with 12%, which is pretty cool. And otherwise, of course, so going back to the Lord, I brought Queek, figuring that he could deal with large targets pretty effectively. He'd be pretty survivable because he'd get thrown around, just like most small lords. And hey, is he just amount of armor, pretty good stats all over, fairly mobile. Yeah, so for his items, I did bring all of it. I actually brought everything on him. I brought Warp Shard armor, which reduces all enemies armor nearby, which I thought could be really useful because Skaven don't dish out that much. Their damage output for their units is kind of lackluster. Their units are definitely not great. The Stormvermin, despite costing more than Greatswords, stats are not amazing. It's most of that comes from the fact that there's a lot of them. There's 120 of them on large settings, as opposed to 90 of Greatswords. I did bring Verminous Valor, which is a self buff that gives him 20%, 4% speed and 8 leadership, which I think is pretty cool. I also gave him Stand Your Ground, of course, because Skaven are cowardly, so anything that can keep him around in the fight for a little longer I think is great. The Trophy Heads, which once again, I was assuming that the Elves might bring a decent amount of lords, and I also wanted to try and kind of assassinate lords more effectively with this build, so I brought Trophy Heads, which is minus 45 melee defense and minus 26 melee attack on an enemy lord or hero, and that could definitely make him a little more vulnerable. Finally, I brought Dwarf Grouger, which much like Colex, Star Crusher, or Carl Franz's Golem Raz, is pretty significant bonus to armor piercing damage. Queek is armor piercing with fairly high melee defense and melee attack, so he's definitely not a pushover as far as combat's concerned. Alongside him, I did bring 2 assassins. These guys are basically your melee infantry, but they're not the style of an Empire Captain or something like that. They're very mobile. They have 54 speed. They have a built-in 30% physical resistance, which is actually pretty high. It's like Savage Orcs. And they can gap close very quickly. They do still provide encourage, but they're not necessarily meant there to back up your line. Slippery has been reworked and to provide more melee defense rather than acceleration and speed. Now it's melee defense and speed, which I think is great, and that should definitely make these guys a little better at sticking on enemy heroes. I did bring Rival Hide Talisman. These are one-use items that they have. Skaven Brew, of course, is debuffs and target units or the hero's armor, and provides massive stat buffs across the board otherwise. So just a very solid upgrade or cast, and of course Rival Hide Talisman, which nukes enemy melee attack and nearby. And finally, of course, trophy heads on both of the assassins as well. This does make them fairly expensive. They're a 1,000-point unit, but I didn't want to give them a shot and just kind of try them out. For my front line, I'm bringing a whole bunch of Stormreverend swords with swords and shields, and these guys have decent melee stats. It's nothing amazing. They don't have any bonus against infantry or nothing like that, but there's a lot of them. They do have 90 armor, which is actually pretty solid. Bronze shields, which I thought would be important against high elves, who can bring a decent amount of shooting. Even their Lothan Seer Guard, which I was definitely suspecting would show up, does have arrows, or does have the ability to shoot, so definitely something I was a little concerned about. Otherwise, they just have decent stats, and I figured that I don't want units that will completely fall apart, because obviously most of the factions that came out do have a lot of sources of terror with a lot of different types of monsters and that sort of stuff. In the back, I did bring some veteraned up clan rats with spears. Their leadership is still pitiful, but and I do believe there's a bigger buff now to leadership from and even melee stats for when you get veterancy points, because these guys I do believe have significantly lower stats when not buffed, but when not veteraned up, or maybe not. Maybe I'm misjudging. Regardless, these guys they're your basic sort of garbage to your infantry, spear infantry. They're comparable, I would say, to Empire spears, give or take. But there once again is a lot of them. And but they are unshielded. They will definitely be susceptible to fire, but I'm hoping that they can shut down enemy large targets. My only shooting contingent is a unit of Deathglobe Bombardiers. I wanted to give these guys a shot. They are a short-range grenade infantry, essentially. I'm trying to think of something to compare them to. The closest thing I can think of is good old Trollhammer torpedoes, I suppose, but even that's not a direct comparison. These guys are, as far as I can tell, much more oriented towards killing groups of infantry rather than, I think, single targets. Alongside them, 2 units of Rat Ogres just to provide some extra beef in my front line, and yeah. So, as we throw things into full gear, or as a little bit of slow-mo here, for my opponent, he did bring Teclis as his lord, and this was definitely caught me a little bit by surprise. Now, I'm not entirely sure what Teclis' lineup of abilities is, but it does look like he has some spells from Lore of Life, Lore of the Wild, Lore of Shadows, Lore of Fire. It actually looks like he has some spells from just about every lore in the book. He also has some pretty crazy abilities, like the Potion of Sharoi, which can heal him and give him some pretty crazy damage resistance. He did bring Kane's Ring of Fury, which is a wind spell that does damage, and Scroll of Hoth, which, as far as I can tell, is just one of the buffs to Winds of Magic reserves, or Winds of Magic or replenishment. So just a very solid spellcaster. His melee stats are kind of garbage, but he does have a Greater Arcane Conduit, which I guess is a new thing, and that will improve his, mean that he can spam spells a lot. He does have Net of Mintok, which is definitely going to be a problem, I think. Now, something that high elves have, and I immediately start pushing in, knowing that I can't really afford to take fire, and you can see already the arrow fire just coming in. You can see that cloud of shafts coming in from the Eagle Cloud bolt throwers. But the unique ability, just like the Skaven have all the abilities for having a lot of them, and then when they're retreating, High Elves have the Martial Prowess, which, while their hit points are above 50%, they have plus 12 melee defense and plus 2 melee attack, which I think is very, very solid as far as buffs go, because it's immediately available. It's not like the Dark Elf one. A lot of people were talking up how good Murderous Prowess is, but I honestly think Martial Prowess might be a bit better just because it's immediately available and it can swing the tide up in your favor very quickly. So my opponent did bring, alongside Teclis, he did bring this 4 units of Lothran Seaguard, who are basically a very solid spear. They are basically something comparable to Empire Spears, I would say, in most of their stats, but with a significantly higher melee defense, especially, well, higher melee defense when Martial Prowess isn't active, and they do have a bow weapon, and which is basically comparable to like a crossbow. So they're basically a crossbow spearman hybrid with silver shields. So just a very solid unit overall. 2 units of Phoenix, unit of Phoenix Guard over here will provide my opponent with some very significant anti-large damage. And these guys do, of course, cause fear, which could be a huge problem for Skaven, who are susceptible to that sort of stuff. They have built-in physical resist, they have 100 armor, they have Martial Mastery, which is an even bigger boost to melee attack and melee defense, and they're just a pretty crazy unit stat-wise in general, very, very solid. And then you have the Swordmasters of Hoeth, who are basically greatsword infantry. They're comparable to greatswords, but better stat-wise. And they do, of course, have that martial prowess built in as well. And then my opponent does have 2 units. He did bring 2 units of Illyrian and Reaver archers over here on the flanks, who are basically just your mounted skirmishers. These guys do have decent melee stats, actually, especially with martial prowess kicked in. But as I throw things into full gear, you can see I'm pushing ahead like as quickly as I can, trying to get my rat ogres on top of these eagle claw bolt throwers. But these guys can definitely dish out a decent amount of hurt. They do have okay range at 140, and yeah, they're just your generic kind of skirmish cav. In the meantime, the last thing here, eagle claw bolt thrower, which is a fairly long range bolt thrower unit that can definitely dish out a lot of AoE here. You can see it's kind of messed up these Stormvermin, disrupted their formation a whole bunch. It does have that kind of grape shot type or a split shot kind of ability, as well as just a straight up damage, as well as a straight up single shot. And you can see the Lothran Seaguard just absolutely annihilated these rat ogres. Rat ogres are very weak, honestly. Their stats are pretty low. They don't in most respects, but they do have decent speed, so I was hoping to get them on top of these eagle claw bolt throwers, just to shut them down and prevent my opponent from really capitalizing on my other infantry's slow speed. In the meantime, Flock of Doom is going down on my units. You can see over here, I have been netted with the net of a Mintok. I do believe this was an overcast, but now it wears off, and I'm able to kind of steamroll these eagle claw bolt throwers. This Phoenix, in the meantime, is casting some sort of spell. You can see the net of Mintok is still affecting these guys, but now we are kind of storming over the artillery pieces, and this kind of going to shift things a little bit in my favor, I'm hoping. You can see the Death Globadiers are trying to keep up and get their grenades going. You can see over here, Teclis does get caught out. My opponent mismicro this a little bit, and he gets surrounded and starts getting beaten on by these Stormvermin. Unfortunately for me, this Flamespire Phoenix does fly down and attack me, but my assassins are on the case. You can see they're just running in there. It's running on all fours. I definitely love some of the graphical effects here. And now they're trying to just knife Teclis in. I do drop Rival High Toss, which might have been a bit of a waste here since it's only Teclis in the Phoenix, but you can see Teclis is getting taken down pretty quickly with trophy heads. Teclis is definitely taking a huge amount of hurt. In the meantime, you can see an ability does go down here, doing some damage as far as I can tell, but I do drop Sentry Ground, and I did drop Verminous Valor on Queek. I'm trying to take down Teclis as quickly as I can, rather than the Phoenix. These Rat Ogres have basically mopped up this Eagle Claw unit. In the meantime, you can see these Phoenix Guard are trying to push in and help Teclis. And the Illyrian Reavers are coming out of hiding to kind of support the advance here. In the meantime, this unit of Storm Vermin and this Clan Rat Spears have gotten bogged down over here fighting Lothran Seaguard and Swordmaster of Hoth. This is not going to end well for them at all, because these guys do have armor-piercing anti-infantry. The Lothran Seaguard have such high melee defense that honestly, these Clan Rats with their terrible stats, and even Storm Vermin are just going to struggle to hit ever, even with the charge bonus in. This Lothran Seaguard is kind of just weathering the storm. You can see how hugely important that melee defense is, because these guys are getting hit by Storm Vermin, they're getting hit by 2 units of Clan Rat Spears, and they're just still not really going down at a good rate for me at all. Unfortunately, my opponent is forced to commit his Illyrian Reavers, unfortunately for him, not for me, and I'm able to kind of pick him apart here. And you can also see these, these Illyrian Reavers are forced to kind of rout off, and they retreat over there. These Phoenix Guard are tearing through the Storm Vermin. Phoenix Guard, of course, are also causing fear, which will probably make these guys rat off fairly quickly. You can see these Rat Ogres still around and kicking. My other unit of Rat Ogres got horribly mauled, and I do believe they've fled. Phoenix is coming back for another go. These Lothran Seaguard are finally getting slaughtered as I push my assassins into the back of them. You can see the Flock of Doom going down. Definitely some great usage of spells here. Queek Head-taker and the assassins are definitely doing some crazy work. Now they are trying to deal with the Swordmaster of Hoth. Queek and the Assassins are definitely, I think, what's keeping me in the game right now. You can see these Storm Vermin are kind of the last bastion over here. Tying down these Lothran Seaguard are doing their best to tie them down, but it's really not enough. And you can see the Lothran Seaguard with their massive amounts of melee defense are just able to hold very, very easily. In the meantime, my Deathwind Globadiers have been bombarding this Phoenix Guard, and as my opponent is not pleased about that, they actually did a decent amount of damage to them. These guys definitely can lay down the smack on enemy infantry blobs, and I was definitely pleasantly pleased. Now you can see they're actually going after the Flamespire's Phoenix, and while their melee stats are not amazing, the Phoenix's melee stats aren't great either, so they're, especially now that it's kind of tired and stats are a little lower, and while these guys are, I do believe, only winded, they're actually able to do a decent amount of damage to it. And you can see they spread out and they start throwing bombs at it, and now the Clan Rat Spear push in and start beating down the Phoenix. Unfortunately, you can see it resurrects. And that was definitely an unpleasant surprise. See, my infantry is kind of falling apart. These Illyrian Reavers are picking at him, but Phoenix Guard is now surrounded. This is definitely one of the problems for my opponent. He is trying to make use of all this ranged fire, but his elite infantry is just getting surrounded and slaughtered one by one. And at the same time, these Storm Vermin are still kind of slugging it out. I'm trying to, just like Orcs, the Skaven, of course, are all over the place, and they're retreating constantly, so I'm constantly trying to just pull them back into the fray, get them back into the middle of things. Unfortunately, you can see that these Illyrian Reavers, now that martial prowess has dropped, their combat stats are much lower, and they're not even going to do that well against the Death Globe Bombardiers. And now I'm pushing in the Clan Rats with Spears, and hopefully going to deal with them. As you can see, Stormvermin is still around and kicking. My main source of damage at this point, though, has been reduced to these assassins and Queek Head-taker. And I'm trying to get on top of these Lothern Seaguard. I do drop Rival High Talisman just to debuff these guys a little bit more, make these Swordmasters of Hoth a little more susceptible. And I'm just trying to tear through these Lothern Seaguard. I do believe the smoke bomb that Queek can cast is an AoE. Vermin's Valor is an AoE knockback. I don't think it causes damage, but it did knock them around. You can see some of my units are kind of pulling back in, and this is definitely, once again, it's kind of like, and you can see I've got Rat Ogres back online. It is definitely a bit like playing Orcs, where you're constantly running around trying to find what units are still around, kicking, pulling back in. And yeah, over here the Swordmasters of Hoth are dishing out immense amounts of hurt, but they are getting swarmed all over, and eventually they will fall apart. The Phoenix is going in, kind of trying to go in. You can see swoops down, but the Phoenix is honestly not that great against Queek and the 2 assassins. They just do so much hurt. You can see another Flock of Doom is going down. Honestly, I think this is a bit of a waste against the assassin and the assassins and Queek. You can see the Flamespire Phoenix is just getting mobbed on, and well, shortly I do believe we start taking some hurt from the assassins. It's once again, its melee defense is not that high. The assassin's actually pretty darn high of melee stats. You can see that even without stand your ground, their melee attack is somewhere in the, I do believe it's somewhere in the 60s. And I'm trying to find it on a modified assassin. Yeah, you can see 60 melee attack. These guys are very high melee stats, or melee offense stats. This is better than, say, an Empire Captain. And most, honestly, I think this might be even way better than like most, I think, Gorbals and Skinwolf or Werkin. So these guys definitely have a very good chance to hit. You can see some globes going in. I'm trying to just, you can actually see, I think the globes actually, I'm not sure if that was globes or melee attack from the heroes, but it's definitely tearing through this guy pretty effectively. Meantime, at this point, it's kind of just my heroes holding the line. Once again, I think Flock of Doom is a bit of a mistake here. The grenades are still going in, being pumped in, and just dishing out a lot of hurt. You can see these guys definitely gaining a lot of experience, so that's just a credit to how much damage they're doing. More grenades going down. I'm just trying to wipe out this infantry and get him off the field as quickly as I can. I'm realizing that I can't catch Teclis because he is on a horse. I just dive into the infantry. I'm trying to tear him apart. And yeah, at this point, it's kind of, we're going to throw things into fast forward a little bit. Teclis is in the middle of these Death Globe Bombardiers, but he's not a great melee combatant, so he's not doing particularly good, especially now that I dropped trophy heads on him to debuff him. You can see my opponent's army is kind of falling apart. He does mop up some units back here. And yeah, we drive Teclis off. He retreats, and he goes off to pursue my his escape Clan Rat Spears. So while he's doing that, we are hunting down the rest of his troops. We jump these Lothern Seaguard, and you can see they melt very, very quickly. And now it's just kind of a mop-up operation of all these units that are kind of hovering around. I do start pushing the Bombardiers down. I do want to go after Teclis eventually. I'm a little worried at this point that my opponent's army is not simply going to shatter. We're going to throw things into fast forward. I see these Lothern Seaguard do rout and shatter, and that leaves only Teclis. And my opponent, if he wanted to be really mean here, he could simply kite me out for the remainder of the game if he really wanted to, because I don't have any way of forcing him to fight. And this is actually kind of a problem for Skaven in general, I think, because their units have very short range. All their range units have very short range. They don't have any cavalry options. Their only option is really artillery, but artillery is not that hard to shut down in general. So I think Skaven are definitely going to be one of those factions that can struggle to win a game or struggle against kiting in a lot of cases. Regardless, you can see I was hoping he would charge in. I dropped trophy heads on him. It doesn't do anything though. You can see now he is getting bogged down fighting an assassin, and we're just going to fast forward things here. My opponent definitely, essentially, he could have definitely kited me out here, but he gave me the opportunity there to catch him, and yeah. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed some of this video gameplay. I know it was a bit of a long video. I know I went on a huge rambling rant at the beginning of this video. But yeah, this was the Skaven. Their units are very, very bad stat-wise. Part of it, of course, is exacerbated by the fact that the Lothern Seaguard has very high melee defense, and most of these units are pretty high quality. I think the Skaven are very much reliant on their range support, and to a lesser extent their monster and hero, well, and honestly, and a lot of their monster and hero support. Trying to think of a comparable army, I can't really think of a directly comparable army. It is a little hard. Obviously, armies are not meant to be directly comparable, I suppose. I think perhaps the closest thing I could think of would be something like Beastmen, who do tend to rely on their lords, heroes, and monster support quite a bit, because their units or their infantry is such garbage. And you can see some of the Stormmen did perform okay. Some gained chevrons. Obviously, some of it depends on who they were fighting. Some of these guys might have been fighting the Phoenix. You can see the Globadiers actually did really well, and this is definitely a unit that pleasantly surprised me. Rat Ogres got torn up very, very quickly. The Assassin and Queek definitely did a great job. So yeah, good game to my opponent. The game's new. There's plenty of strats that could be or might be and that need testing. So we got plenty of new content coming up. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. There's going to be plenty of Warhammer 2 and probably still some Warhammer 1 content coming along. I obviously still have to work on those guides. Obviously still have to work on some Sanctus Street stuff. So yeah, I appreciate you all for watching. If you liked it, leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about Warhammer or Warhammer 2, be sure to ask those down in the comments, and I will do my best to respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I appreciate you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.